I love melee weapons in video games. It doesn't matter if it's gritty, down-in-the-dirt medieval swordplay, or absurd high fantasy where you're cutting down gods like they killed your family. There's just something special about slicing, dicing, and even occasionally getting sliced yourself, you know? Though oftentimes, regardless of the form in which these games are packed and despite how much one loves it, they can feel samey. You've done this before. Many times. Then there's Half Sword, a free demo at the time of writing this that began as little more than a tech demo upon the infinite shelves of the internet. Upon gracing Steam with its marvelous presence, it quickly gained a modest but passionate fanbase that is growing as we speak. But why? Taking it at face value, all this game offers is either fights in a square arena or a Jack the Ripper simulator, all hosted by Vladimir Putin. What do people like about this demo? What makes Half Sword special? Is it immersive controls? Well, one could argue that Kingdom Come Deliverance and its sequel have done that already. It's not silliness. So many beat-em-up games like Gang Beasts have that in spades. What about gore? Well, one look at games like Prototype and you know it's not that. No, these things have been done before. It's special because it tosses all of those ingredients and more into a medieval blender, creating something much, much tastier, much greater than the sum of its parts. I think to best explain my thought process, I can break this down into sections, beginning with: within the context of video games, agency is when the player has freedom to pursue their goals in ways that they see fit, and in doing so, reap outcomes that make sense. With this in mind, one might immediately think of an RPG adventure like CG Projekt Red's Witcher series, or Larian Studios' Baldur's Gate 3, wherein your choices potentially have world-changing impact. But player agency doesn't have to be on such a huge narrative scale to be meaningful. It can be found in something as straightforward as, say, combat mechanics. I want to show you something. This is Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. This game and its sequel, Shadow of War, are excellent examples of video game sword combat. You flow between multiple combatants, slashing at Uruks, countering incoming attacks, dodging around them, throwing them to the ground, and performing brutal takedowns. And that's awesome. You feel empowered to defeat your enemies, yet it's offset by the challenge they present to you. And you feel every wince-inducing, lip-puckering fatality that you unleash. Like I said, it's excellent. But what are you doing? Ultimately, you're simply triggering pre-made animations. In this case, Talion swinging his pointy death stick, and thus triggering subsequent animations, i.e. the Uruk ouchie animations. This execution is glorious, but I've seen it more times than I care to count. You are effectively tied to the list of options presented to you. Within the context of combat mechanics, there is no agency. It's not like that with Half Sword. Half Sword uses physics calculated in real time. The velocity of an object, be it weapons, the player, or NPCs, when it hits another object, has impact. This is applied to every weapon swing and even simple bodily movement. You don't need to swing your weapons to attack. You could just sprint into the fella, and that could send him crashing to the ground. Combat isn't defined by preset animations, but emerges dynamically from each object's mass, momentum, and interaction. You don't have a list of options in a fight in Half Sword. You have a blend, a spectrum, if you would. You have agency. Of course, a physics engine within a game is hardly a new thing. They go back decades at this point. But I'll now flawlessly segue into my second section. This game is Hellish Quart, a 1v1 sword combat simulator that is also a physics-based game, where the weapons strike exactly and the velocity at which they do so makes all the difference. You can attempt to block by keeping your weapon raised, or you can dodge by maneuvering your character around to ensure that your opponent's weapon fails to connect, or to ensure that you deliver a fatal strike. This is also awesome. It's tense and methodical, a rarity among sword combat games. It rewards observation, patience, and of course, knowledge of your abilities to capitalize upon any opportunities. The controls for your character present many options within your moveset, and knowing when to use each one is key. As I said, the game is physics-based, which grants a lot of freedom in how combat plays out, but the controls are all for pre-defined moves. Again, it's not like that with Half-Sword. Half-Sword uses very open-ended controls. For the record, I'll be discussing the keyboard and mouse controls because using a controller in this game is sacrilege, said with love. Much of it is predictable, such as Wasad to move your fella around, but truly, in a sword-fighting game, it's these sword-holding noodles that are perhaps the most important. Each arm is linked to the left or right mouse button, the left button for the right arm and the right button for the left. This upsets me immensely, but let's move on. You can move both arms in front of you in any direction at any speed from any direction. And perhaps most importantly, they move in ways that make sense. I don't think I can stress enough how ideal such a movement system is for a physics-based game like this, because the motion and velocity-based gameplay can be capitalized upon to such an extent the skill ceiling blasts into space. And this is what links the controls directly to. To understand what makes combat truly engaging in Half-Sword, we need to appreciate one critical factor. The players need to actively read and react to opponents in real time. Let's compare this briefly to Dark Souls, a game widely revered for its combat mechanics, and rightly so. In Dark Souls, you must anticipate enemy movements, carefully timing your rolls, attacks, and blocks, etc. But ultimately, once you've memorized an enemy's patterns, the fight can quickly become a predictable dance. Beautiful, yet routine. In Half-Sword, the enemy's next move is as open-ended as yours, at least as much as the AI allows. You're constantly engaged in a dance that never follows the same choreography twice and demands creative problem-solving on the fly. On the subject of this martial problem-solving, now's the time to ask what exactly your limbs can do for you. So, the mouse buttons and movement are how you maneuver your arms, but most of the time, you'll be maneuvering the weapons they're holding, really. Each weapon handles differently, and in ways you entirely expect. A mace and dagger will be much quicker on those strikes than a warhammer, but the latter will hit like an angry freight train. Additionally, most weapons can be handled in different ways. A small sword can be held one-handed or two-handed for more power and control. A larger weapon can be held either as you'd expect, or in the case of a greatsword, you can hold it half-sword. Yeah, he said the thing. Allowing for opening up an armored target before shoving the pointy bit into the gaps in its armor. If you want to survive for a decent amount of time, you need to know how your weapon will behave. You might deflect an incoming strike with your sword and use that momentum to swiftly counterattack. Or perhaps your opponent knocks the sword out of your hand. No worries. You smack his brains out with your shield in that case. Probably my favorite thing to do. On top of weapons, you can kick, which opens up even more possibilities. Lock weapons, drag it up, and mercilessly kick away at their legs. You are constantly reading your opponent and acting or reacting, thus, you are always engaged. On top of this engagement, this game offers you another layer of variety. In its Half-Sword offers different game modes, often with additional combat scenarios within them. One of them, arguably the main attraction here, is the Gauntlet, where you work your way up from miserable filthy beggar all the way up to the Baron. And you have a single life to do it all in, otherwise you're sent back to your no-good beggar beginnings. But you always have a single chance at redemption. When you die, you're sent to another game mode, the Abyss, where you have to fight your way through a much cleaner, much safer version of London, make it to the boss and end him, and you get to return to the Gauntlet without any loss of progress. Or alternatively, you can just tell Putin here at the menu that fair elections are taking place behind him, and he'll snap his head around fast enough to be sent to the Abyss whenever you want to take that challenge. Fun fact, these guys are actually called Willy, but, well, I call him Putin. The third way to play is good old free mode, where you can simply pick whatever rank you want, pick what weapon you want, and off you go, kiddo. Definitely a good choice for trying out weapons or just blowing off steam without a care. As a result of all the above points, Half-Sword shines brightly, perhaps even brightest, when it comes to This is because it lacks rigid limitations on how you approach the game. And I'm not just talking your preferred playstyle here. No, I'm talking about you as a gamer. On one level, the enthusiast can spend hours mastering subtle techniques like precision sword manipulation, discovering exactly how angles and velocities affect weapon performance. Each weapon has its quirks, strengths, and weaknesses after all, so achieving mastery is both satisfying and challenging. And on the other hand, the more casual player can have spontaneous sessions, perfect for those spare 10 minutes between tasks, allowing quick rounds filled with fun chaos, you know? I've done this many times myself when I have a video rendering or something. You don't need mastery to enjoy yourself here. Simply swinging your weapons around like a fool and giggling like a medieval maniac is more than enough to entertain. At least for folks like me. Going back to the actual gameplay, no two sessions are identical. Even if you intentionally try, each combat scenario, defined by its physical unpredictability and player choices, ensures endless variation. This unpredictability is why players like myself keep returning. We're never bored, we're always amused, and we're forever challenged. Take this match, for example. I was armed with a knife and the other guy a pitchfork. Try as I might to get past his pointy stick, he kept it up. I tried to squeeze past, but my knife arm got skewered. Thankfully, I simply swapped the knife into my other hand, and then I simply hacked away at him, his weapon effectively keeping me at a very unhealthy distance. For him. Or another time when I was armed with a battle axe against a fella with the old sword and board. We quickly injured each other with his sword firmly jammed into my arm. Naturally, my messed up arm dropped my axe, and thus my quickest option was to pull his sword from my arm and turn it against him. We duked it out for a while, both of us rapidly losing blood. By the end, I had lost most use of my arms and was simply wailing on him as he fell to the ground. I officially won the match, but moments later, I died. Or how about in this Carnage match? I quickly, and in pretty cool style I think, dispatched one guy with a nifty slash to the throat. Filled with confidence, I charged another guy, sword outstretched for a beautiful thrust, and a beautiful broken nose as my face crashed into the back of his metal helmet. Stunned and disorientated, I drew my mace but had yet to regain my balance and was quickly overpowered by the remaining guy, forcing me to surrender. So, what is it that makes Half Sword such a fine example of video game medieval combat? In short, it's the seamless integration of all of the above. Tangible agency, open controls, relentless engagement, and exceptional replayability. It grants players genuine freedom to approach combat creatively rather than forcing them down any predetermined pathways. All contained within realistic physics. Well, as realistic as can be, of course. The battles are a canvas on which players continuously paint new experiences, using not just their skill and reactions, but also their patience and their minds. You can be deeply analyzing weapon mechanics or casually fumbling through sword fights. Either way, you are constantly discovering something new, hilarious, or spectacularly satisfying. It truly is greater than the sum of its parts. A delightful, surprising, and irresistibly replayable masterclass of its kind, because give it a chance, and it will be what you want it to be. I'm Artie. Thanks for listening to me ramble.